Everybody, this is the Wednesday, October 19th, 2022 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, good afternoon. Please call the roll.
Good afternoon. Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. And now we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Portland City Council. City Council is holding hybrid public meetings with in-person attendance in addition to electronic attendance. If you wish to testify before council in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance by visiting the council agenda on the council clerk's webpage at www.portland.gov/council/agenda. You may sign up for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. Written testimony may be submitted at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. For testifiers joining virtually, please unmute yourself once the council clerk calls your name. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during city council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. A timer will indicate when your time is done. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Additionally, council may take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one item on this afternoon's agenda, but it's a really important one. Could you please read item 873, a non-emergency ordinance?
Amend Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Code to better align with and equitably meet city climate action goals.
Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, I'd first like to start by stating that our North Star climate goals that we must reduce carbon emissions 50% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. We reaffirmed these goals in our recently adopted climate emergency work plan, and I thank you all for your great feedback and collaboration on that. Now today, I'm here to present the proposal that my office has developed through numerous conversations with PSEF staff, community stakeholders, and each of you that began in earnest in late 2021. These conversations are the results of the gift that our community gave to the city when they placed PSEF on the ballot and passed it in November 2018. It was placed on the ballot by the very communities that have been historically excluded from our region's long history of environmental investments that have primarily benefited well-off households and businesses. Today, we are here to reaffirm and honor the intent of the 2018 ballot initiative to reaffirm its prioritization on low-income communities and communities of color, but to also leverage all the lessons learned over the past 2.5 years to strengthen PSEF in service to our communities. As we have just begun seeing the fruits of many of our RFP 1 and 2 grantees, I'm excited to see this evolution in PSEF support for greater climate investments in the community, to see more opportunities for collaboration with our community nonprofits, and for our collective growth of the PSEF program and community work together. Our frontline communities' ideas and values are the strength behind PSEF, and that remains the same and is at the very center of our proposal. I know that on critical work like this that requires government as a partner, it can hold some skepticism from community because of our history of past government injustices enacted sometimes upon the very same communities that we are centering. So I want to say that we see that, we understand that, and we thank you for the trust that you're affording us and for being in this work and journey together. So our hope and our faith in our partnership will continue to grow through demonstrated outcomes that hold us all accountable to our values. I also want to acknowledge that we have heard concerns from community about definitions within the proposed code. We have heard you loud and clear. Where additional clarity and definitions are needed, we are committed to go through administrative rulemaking to ensure we clarify and define terms. We explicitly created administrative rulemaking authority because of elements like this. So I thank you for raising these concerns and encourage you to engage in our administrative rulemaking efforts when they begin. This program has always operated by community and for community, and that is an element of PSEF program that will never change, and we are very committed to that. Secondly, we've heard community desires for the code to define the allocation for the Community Responsive Grant Program. We understand this desire and had originally planned to include such allocations. However, the place for those allocations is in the Climate Investment Plan. Community responsive grants will absolutely be maintained as a core component of each climate investment plan. However, it's important that the Climate Investment Plan be an iterative document based on the current climate science, city decarbonization priorities, community input and need, and capacity. As a new program, we know PSEF will continue to change and grow over time. We're so grateful to the staff, I'm grateful to my colleagues, and most importantly, very grateful to the community for continuing to share your thoughts and feedback, advocating for your concerns, and helping to ensure PSEF's continued success. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to BPS Director Donnie Oliveira.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, City Commissioners, and our Portland community members present today and listening online. We have a robust agenda today, so I want to make my initial comments brief, but I want to acknowledge a couple of things. Next slide, please. The Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund's mission is to take substantive action to reduce carbon emissions and lessen the impacts of the climate crisis for all Portlanders, but especially the historically marginalized communities that experience the most drastic effects of climate change. It feels like every time in front of you, Commissioners, there's another crisis that the world's experiencing that just shows the climate crisis is upon us. It's not a future state, it's here. And we keep seeing lost lives, lost livelihoods, and billions of dollars in damages. We can continue to sit back and be reactive, or we can take proactive action to show what it's like to lead with empathy and urgency. Collaboration is key, though. This past summer, we brought a climate emergency work plan that showed a really audacious list of actions the city can take to curb our own emissions and lead by example globally. But collaboration is key. It starts with looking at synergies around our city, our communities, and our private partnerships that might exacerbate good for once. But it actually starts with staff. And I want to take a quick moment before I dive into my presentation to acknowledge the staff of the PSEF program who have really been leading that collaborative mission since day one. Program Manager Sam Barrasso, rightfully so, has been in front of you many times over the last year to receive those accolades, but there's a huge team behind him that I want to take a moment to name. So Katie Lister, James Valdez, June Reyes, Rachel Gilmore, Jason Ford, Wendy Colfagan, David Granfield, Angela Prividelli, Chris Gruba, Jay Richmond, Alexander McPherson, Mika Barrett, and Christine Lobregat have all been behind the scenes building that collaborative spirit and those relationships that make the program tick. So thank you, PSF staff, for your contributions. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda today. We're going to do a quick tee-up by me. We're going to hand it over to Program Manager Sam Barrasso to walk through the changes and to queue up the vote. And then we're going to hear from invited speakers to provide their perspective on these changes. But I want to start by stating that BPS is unequivocally committed to implementing the intent of the 2018 voter initiative to fund climate action efforts. While we're making some changes that are going to expand the ways that the funds are allocated, we are staying true to the values and the guidelines that the community laid out in 2018, and we want to ensure you that we're going to continue to work with the PSF Grant Committee to ensure those values are manifested in quality program. Next slide, please. So as we're looking at this ordinance in front of you today, I want you to think about a few things. We've been thoughtful in hearing from you all, hearing from the city auditor's report, but also from our partners who have been responsive to the first two RFPs to see how we can ensure that and strengthen the program. These changes, and thank you, Commissioner Ruby, for your leadership in bringing them forward, are responsive to our urgency and climate action. But more importantly, it's thinking about the ways that we're leveraging the synergies and partnerships with our bureaus and community. In fact, I would actually argue that by doing these code changes, we're going to strengthen and provide more agility in how we're responsive to the climate crisis in our own city today, because it's going to leverage existing programs and work that our colleagues in other bureaus are doing, namely right now the Housing Bureau and Parks and Rec, to ensure that their programs are not just meeting their goals, but also meeting the climate goals of our city. Next slide, please. Because as we stated many times, we have some pretty bold goals for climate reduction. Specifically emissions reductions by 50% by 2030. That's in 8 years, folks. We have some work to do. And of course, the total net zero goal of 2050, which is achievable with some bold action and some strong commitments from both our council, our city partners, and frankly, the leadership of our community. Next slide, please. And last, this is the part where I hand it over to Sam with leaving this thought with you all. We're experiencing a climate crisis. We keep saying this. We've set out a work plan. We know the work that has to get done. And in truth, we need everybody at the table working together in partnership and collaboration to see it through. PSF is one tool in the toolkit, and it's going to leverage incredible investment opportunities for our city and our communities. But I must stress it's not enough. And so as you hear today the code changes, I'm also asking you to think about how else can we leverage partnerships and strategies amongst all the bureaus of Portland to really ratify and expedite our climate action. So as we talk about this today, Sam's going to walk through these changes. I'm asking all of us here today, not just you all on the dais, but the community listening, think about it. How do we do that work in Portland? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Barrasso, Program Manager for PSF, to walk through the changes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Oliveira. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. It's good to be here before you today, and good afternoon to our community members present today and listening online. Sam Barrasso for the record, Program Manager for the PSF program, and I'm here to provide an overview of these structural changes. Let's move to the next slide. But before I jump in, I'd just like to reaffirm some of the context shared by the Commissioner as well as Director Oliveira. Over the past 2.5 years of program implementation, we've learned numerous lessons. Through that time, we've administered multiple large and small funding solicitations. We've managed several grantees. We've taken in significant community feedback from both large, established organizations to small and emerging organizations serving our priority populations. We've seen fund revenues greater than originally projected, and we've received early audit recommendations. So in late 2021, early 2022, we began conversations with the Commissioner on improvements to PSF based on our many lessons learned and began discussing structural changes. In discussing those changes, we outlined 4 principal objectives. Next slide, please. Okay, objective 1 was to identify changes to enable accelerated funding of carbon reduction projects in alignment with the ballot measure intent. Objective 2 was to draw clearer and more relevant connections between the PSF program and the city's carbon reduction goals. Objective 3 was to address administrative and operational needs identified by staff in the committee. and many of these directly connect to Objective 1 in terms of being able to move funds faster. And last, Objective 4 was to capture and address any remaining audit recommendations that we didn't do in working through the first 3 objectives. So that's what I'm going to walk you through here today. Next slide. The proposed ordinance before you today is packaged with 4 core elements, all of which we will detail in the following slides. They include 1, the development of a climate investment plan, which will provide a 5-year roadmap for PSEF investments, providing the community with both certainty and clarity. 2, they will provide for initial strategic initiatives and funding priorities to provide a framework for the PSEF committee to guide immediate development of some programs while designing others. 3, there's a host of enabling code updates in order to allow us to do those things. And lastly, 4, there are code cleanups in order to harmonize definitions throughout the code and address inconsistencies and ambiguities. Next slide. Okay. The Climate Investment Plan is the primary organizing framework for how PSEF will be implemented. In this proposal, one of the committee's primary roles will be to recommend the Climate Investment Plan to the City Council for consideration and approval, and through this, the committee would no longer be making grant funding recommendations. This will allow us to better leverage the committee's expertise and time availability. The Climate Investment Plan, as Commissioner Rubio noted, will be updated every 5 years based on the latest information, including current climate science, city decarbonization priorities, community input and need, and capacity. And in this, there will be robust community engagement, and the Climate Investment Plan, as per this code, must specifically address continued funding allocations for the Community Responsive Grants Program, new strategic initiatives, measurable goals and/or outcomes for each of those programs in a responsive framework. While creating the 5-year plan allows us to create a dependable foundation for investments and the ability to create a planning horizon, we will have the opportunity for evaluation and responsive adjustments as community needs and the impacts of the climate crisis change. Okay, next slide. So in the following 2 slides, I'm going to detail the initial strategic initiatives as well as funding priorities that are before you today. So we have 2 initiatives. One is growing an equitable tree canopy and associated workforce and contracting pool to support the city's 2035 tree canopy cover goals. And that's going to be to the tune of $40 million or $8 million over 5 years, $8 million per year over 5 years. 2 will be to raise the bar on efficiency and renewable energy upgrades in new and redeveloped, regulated, affordable, multifamily housing. And that's to the tune of $12 million per year over 5 years or $60 million total. Next slide. And then we have funding priorities that will be further detailed through the Climate Investment Plan with guidance and to be recommended by the PSEF committee to you all. Later, if approved towards the end of this month, that this would come before you all in late summer or summer of 2023. And so that includes about $300 million for housing, small commercial energy efficiency, renewable energy, and embodied carbon savings. About $100 million for transportation decarbonization. And I want to name, this is a new funding area that we are specifically carving out as through this code change. Transportation decarbonization wasn't explicitly called out in the original code. 3, $100 million for low-cost access to capital or financing for carbon-reducing projects. 4, $30 million for resilient community centers. So these would be community centers operated by community-based organizations as well as government centers. And so these are centers that may be refuges for cooling when we have extreme heat events, or refuges from events like this that we're currently experiencing when we have bad air. And then 5 would be a programming to support building community-based organizational capacity to the tune of $8 million. And last but not least, an allocation of $10 million for 82nd Avenue planning and early investment for low-carbon communities. And so all these there's a substantive amount of work to happen here. This outlines the framework for the committee to begin their work, further define these, and then come back to you all later in summer of 2023 with a plan that aligns with these funding priorities for approval. And so that would set the stage for the 5 years of investments that we would make. Okay. Next slide. So in the following two slides, I'm going to walk through the core sets of code changes and sort of categorize where how they fall. And we've generally described them as equity-centered improvements, climate-centered improvements, and administrative improvements. Now, these are all set in order to enable the 5-year climate investment plan structure. So that is the overarching framework. Within our equity-centered improvements to the code, we've clearly defined priority populations using the vision from the ballot initiative. We've expanded equity priorities to all of the funding categories, not just the clean energy funding category. We've expanded workforce priority populations to be more inclusive, not solely women, but also folks experiencing gender or sex-based discrimination in the workplace. And we've enabled workforce development projects to serve people inside the Portland metro area so that we can have more folks able to serve and work on PSEF projects so that it's not strictly bound to the Portland boundary.
Commissioner Hurst, you had a question on that.
Commissioner, thank you, excuse me, thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Rubio, would you prefer we wait till the full presentation is over, or is it okay to ask questions?
I'm going to probably wait till the full presentation. Is that what you
Is that what you prefer, Sam?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll wait, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm
And
old,
then-
I forget stuff, you know.
Thank you. So, and then there's our climate-centered improvements. This is one, and this was important to align our code with the broader city's climate action goals, as opposed to strictly a climate action plan, which was designed for different purposes. 2 is adding transportation decarbonization much more explicitly into the code, as well as capacity building as funding areas and eligible funding areas. 3 was to clarify the climate focus of the other funding category within the original code. And last was to create an ongoing green infrastructure maintenance reserve for projects identified within the climate investment plan. And lastly, there's this bucket of improvements that are focused on administrative needs. Now, first here is an important one and where there's been confusion, so I'm going to spell this one out. In this first bullet, we say allow both grants and contracts with potential roles for government entities and businesses as set within the climate investment plan. First, the proposed changes, we will have the ability to distribute funds from the program through not only grants, but also contracts. And a big part of this is how we are able to direct some of these projects and the difference between a grant versus a contract. 2, grants will be limited to nonprofits and government entities, whereas contract administration opportunities will be open to nonprofits, government entities, and for-profit businesses. However, eligibility will be further defined within the climate investment plan that will come before you, that the committee will be working on, that will come before you all in summer 2023. For instance, not every strategic initiative will be open for for-profit administrators. For each strategic initiative, we will need to determine whether a for-profit business can help us serve our priority populations effectively, in a timely manner, to build community capacity and or diversify the workforce. So there will be those types of conversations when thinking through eligibility within the climate investment plan. Okay. And so the other changes within our other administrative improvements within the code is to explicitly create and authorize the Bureau Director, Director Oliveira, to adopt administrative rules to bring greater clarity through the program, and to increase our administrative limit to enable adequate staffing to provide oversight to our grantees and our contractors. Okay, next slide. And then there's a body of changes that are focused on code cleanup. One is to ensure consistency and improved governance. It's to harmonize definitions throughout the code. It's to clarify roles of committee and staff. And it's to clarify public posting of solicitations and grant information. 2 is to address committee composition. One is to expand the committee eligibility in line with best practices at the city. And so this means that committee members do not only have to live within the city of Portland, but can also work within the city or have other meaningful engagement within the city in order to serve on the committee. And then 2 is to add transportation decarbonization as a body of expertise that is required on the committee in alignment with the addition of that funding area. Okay. Next slide. And so the current model of PSEF program structure has been, and what we've called our RFP number 1 and RFP number 2 is really our community responsive grant solicitations. That's what we're calling them within this code. Now, we've done, through RFP1 and RFP2, we've awarded $116 million total across 110 grants awarded to date. We've awarded through our mini grants program $450,000 total across 87 grants awarded to date. And now we've, in a way, we've had strategic initiatives. We didn't call it this at the time, but our heat response program, the PSEF heat response program, was one of our early strategic initiatives where we guided the implementation of that program in a more directive way. And that is implementing about $16 million over 5 years for the installation of 15,000 units. And I want to congratulate staff that have worked diligently on that and our community partners, because we got confirmation recently that we hit well over our goal of installing 3,000 units this past summer. Okay, next slide. Thank you. It was a tremendous effort. And so as you see here in our future model, the overarching framework will be the climate investment plan that will have both community allocations and spell out our outcomes and goals for our community responsive grant solicitation in advance, as well as our strategic initiatives. Next slide. So what you see here within the community responsive grants, you will still see funding allocations for energy efficiency, renewable energy projects that are benefiting residential, commercial, multifamily buildings. We will still see green infrastructure and regenerative agriculture projects that are helping sequester carbon by planting green things in soils and helping provide an array of other community benefits. You'll still see workforce and contractor development projects. But notably, this next one, transportation decarbonization, will be an additional funding area that you will see on our community responsive grant solicitations. You'll still see other GHG reducing projects, greenhouse gas emissions reducing projects that don't fall in those other categories, and we'll still have our mini grants program. Next slide. This is where you'll see noticeable changes. We'll have our strategic initiatives, and across each of these areas, we anticipate seeing strategic initiatives. For, again, you've seen our heat response program, but the rest of these would be new programming for energy efficiency and renewables, for regulated affordable housing, for equitable tree canopy development, for housing and small commercial energy efficiency, renewable energy, embodied carbon, transportation decarbonization, and all the other elements that I shared earlier. And so, let me look back to my slide here and make sure. And so with that, it's to note that we've got a substantial body of work ahead. This will all be spelled out, including more clarity around our outcomes and our goals through the climate investment plan that we will begin working on immediately, and in some ways have already begun working on conceptually once this council takes action. And that would come before you all in summer of 2023. And with that, next slide. I think you will see this ordinance. I know this is our first reading, but this will be the ordinance before you all next week again. This is the ordinance before you all today. And the next decision point for the council after action on this item would be, should you approve this ordinance, would be a decision on the climate investment plan in summer of 2023. So this generally concludes my remarks on the structure of these changes. The next slide, I would be teeing up our invited speakers, and I'm tracking our time just to see if I've queued them up for this. And I'm going to look in the room. Okay,
Excuse me, Mayor, I'd like to ask a question, if I may, before
Yeah,
we
why don't
bring.
you, because I don't want you to,
Forget,
yeah, or have Sam disappear.
Commissioner Rubio, thank you for the strong leadership of Portland Clean Energy Fund. I have some questions. I did not get a clean copy of what you're proposing to change. And so it's kind of hard to follow what's being added, and what's being taken out of the resolution that's in front of us. But a couple of things concern me as I've read through Exhibit A. When I think about let me back up. I guess as I read this, I get concerned that we're not actually intentionally talking about people of color. What are we talking? I mean specifically about Black, Latinx, other people of color. We've actually come up with a new term that, let's see, what was that? which again, I'm concerned that as we change language, we're not really going to prioritize the populations that we want. Let's see, I'm sorry, what was that term? It's a generic term that actually doesn't prioritize Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. So I'd want to look at that. I'm also concerned, I guess, about the assumption that we will reach equity goals by contracting. The city of Portland has never once done that. And so if we aren't intentional about who are we going to partner with, who are we expecting them to partner with, I see a scenario where people of color will not benefit from the hard work they did in getting this fund passed. And so that's kind of my first couple of questions. Any response to that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor, Commissioner, thank you for the questions. I recognize the red line or the black line changes are challenging to read. What we attempted to do was, in fact, in the original code, there's a lot of different references for both underserved communities and historically marginalized communities, and we did try to clarify that. And anywhere going through the code and noting each of the instances, we did clean that up to focus on, and I think we've added actually explicitly that the focus in the prioritization is on low-income communities and communities of color. And so that is an area where we strengthened that focus, and we made sure it was clear and applied to each of our funding areas. So that's an area I'm happy to share with you a clean copy. It is an easier document to read, but I know that's a little challenging with the black line copy. As far as the fact that one of the key changes is that funds would no longer only be distributed through grants, but would be distributed through contracts as well, which means, yes, we would be working with our procurement team within the city. And we recognize the challenges that our procurement team has had over the years. And I think that it is Director Biko Taylor has done tremendous work, and he's got more work to be done. I think a big part of increasing our administrative cap is being able to resource us adequately so that we have our staff members as part of the procurement team, so that as we are running these contracts, we get to be more heavily engaged, that it gives us room so that we don't have excuses. And so that is an important part. That is an important part of the conversations we've been in with Director, with Biko Taylor. And it's an important part where I encourage both the council as folks within the community to stay with us and to track us, because we agree with you that that's important work that needs to be done.
So I hope that we will develop. I appreciate that answer, Sam. Thank you. And you and I talked about this a bit briefly. I want to make sure that as we start getting grants for these funds, that the Community Oversight Board is setting what the criteria looks like. Because I can tell you, if we continue to aspire and never achieve, it's going to really, I'm trying to look for a polite word to say, it's not going to be a good thing for our community, right? And so what I have learned in my very short time here is if it doesn't say it explicitly, it doesn't exist. And so I am happy to have my office work with you to really think about how we make sure that there's no wiggle room in this statute that you're asking us to pass, so that it continues to benefit the people that should benefit from this fund. My other concern is limiting the community fund to 20%. And we've all know that we got a gazillion more dollars than we thought we'd have when we started this journey. But we don't know what the future holds. And I am concerned when we say, like nonprofits would be available, they get 20%. Well, what happens when our nonprofits actually build their capacity to take on more resources than that? I would hate for you to have to come back to council and actually change the policy if we are building the organization's capacity to be able to do more. So I would like to think about that before we finalize this.
Yeah, I'd love to respond, commissioners, if that's okay. I think that, and I should have said this before, thank you for that comment. A key part to these changes, and I think setting the stage within a document such as the Climate Investment Plan, is going to be outlining those goals on a programmatic basis for each of the individual programs, because we know within each, whether you're talking about tree planting, whether we're talking about residential weatherization, whether we're talking about multifamily building retrofits, that the respective goals within each of those are going to look different, both in terms of the people that are working on those projects as well as those that are getting the benefits of those projects. And so the idea and the expectation is those goals and outcomes, both from a climate perspective, so emissions reduced for each, whether it's each dollar of tree planting or each dollar going to housing retrofit, is set within that plan, as well as our more equity-oriented goals in terms of households served, in terms of percentage of contractors, percentage of workers that are benefiting. So we expect that level of detail to come through the plan. It will be an iterative product. So I think that was an important part to setting the 5-year horizon, recognizing that both the projects and the beneficiaries will be able to, there will be, as we make these investments, we will learn, we will grow our contracting pool, and we will be able to update those goals over time, as opposed to sort of steadfast locking them. To the point around the 20% of the funds being awarded to nonprofit organizations with a track record of benefiting economically disadvantaged communities, that is a floor. And that existed in the original ballot measure. It's something we're not adjusting, but I hope, and I say this, we've seen that as a very low floor. We've implemented this program to make sure we are far and way above that floor, and we will continue to do so. It is an expectation of the community. It is an expectation of myself and our staff, and so that is a floor. That's the way we see it, and we just didn't touch that language.
I appreciate that, but the devil's always in the detail, because there'll be some company that will say, well, see, you actually, even your document says you're limited to 20%. So again, I trust you explicitly, and I trust Donnie explicitly, but I have learned that if we aren't asking the right questions, we don't get the right answers. I would hope also, as we think about doing contracting, that we don't use the city's normal procurement process as a model, because honestly, I think even with the current city process, we could do so much better if we were much more proactive about it. I have a lot of respect for Biko Taylor, and unfortunately, he inherited a mess that is going to take him some years to get out of. And so it's my hope that that PSEF becomes the model that will help Director Taylor actually think differently about how we contract. Again, excellent work. I'm really grateful. But I think I will be looking to work with you on some amendments before this comes for a final vote.
Commissioner, if I may offer a couple of things, because you're asking the right questions at this moment in time. First, on the procurement side, BPS and other programs, our waste program in particular, have been doing special procurements with Biko and his team to look at ways differently to center our minority and women-owned contractors in the waste field. So that's just an example that we're really excited and thanking him for his leadership. And the other part about this and why the strategic initiatives are so important to look at is it's not only just continue to center our frontline communities and those most exposed to the climate crisis, but it's also a chance for us to leverage other investments the city's making. And so that's in partnership with the Housing Bureau and Parks and Rec. What is their work plan and their capital investments? And so how do we leverage the PSEF funds to, kind of shape what that looks like going forward? So there's actually value add in those investments, but completely hear you about the concern on the 20% number and how we defend that as the floor. So thank you.
Okay, I think this brings us to the part that I'm more excited about, and it's to turn it over to many of our partners, colleagues, to share their reflections on what we've presented before you all today. And so I will start with Megan Horst, the PSEF Committee Co-Chair, and then you've got a slate of other speakers before you all today. And so with that, Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for having me. For the record, my name is Megan Horst, and as Sam stated, and I've been in front of you before, I am a co-chair of the Community Advisory Committee. And I've been on the committee for 3 years now, and in my day job, I work at PSU as an associate professor in the School of Urban Studies and Planning, where I focus on green infrastructure and regenerative ag, so that's kind of the expertise I bring to the committee. And today I'm here speaking as myself, not the full committee because we haven't voted on this exactly, but I'm trying to bring at least some of the conversations and the sentiments that we've had in discussions by the committee over the last few months. So as you know, I've been here to talk with you a few times over the last few years, including recently sending a letter in spring after the city auditor's report. And in the letter, we, the co-chairs, thought the audit raised some important next steps, and we committed to working with Commissioner Rubio's office and staff to implement some of the suggested changes. And we've already done some of that, including approving performance metrics in June 2022. And today you're hearing about some proposed code changes that will address part of the audit response. And so while the proposed changes are coming more from Commissioner Rubio's office and from staff than from the committee, I can tell you that we have been in communication in the last few months and have been in multiple meetings. And we've had general awareness of and input into the process. And I think on the whole, our committee has felt that our feedback has been heard and incorporated, and that the proposed reforms align with a lot of what our committee has been talking about with staff over the last months and years, really. And we're generally supportive of a lot of the changes here, especially the ones that advance things that were mentioned in the audit and that we committed to, which were clarifying PSEF's contribution and role in climate action efforts, particularly in this proposed changes through the 5-year climate investment plans. We definitely are supportive of the increase in staff from 5% to 12% because we've seen our staff struggle to keep up with the workload of the fund and to do the good job that is needed to support community members and to make sure the projects are managed effectively. So we see that as really critical. Clarifying PSEF's role in building organizational capacity. We've seen this as a committee being really important, particularly helping groups that haven't accessed this level of funding in the past, that are maybe newer to the space or newer in development, to help them develop experience in financial management practices to manage increasingly bigger and bigger projects. So perhaps, like Commissioner Hardesty said, in the future we'll have a community-based and nonprofit sector that can really handle big amounts of money. And we want to support really frontline serving and culturally specific organizations expand into new, really desperately needed climate resilience work. And another part of the changes coming forward that we appreciate is it further clarifies the role of the PSEF committee away from being grant reviewers, which I think as volunteer committee members, we haven't felt has been the most appropriate use of our time and not a sustainable use going forward as the fund has expanded. So this clarifies our role as setting goals and outcomes within the CIP and then reviewing and being publicly on record about whether we're meeting the goals and metrics in our reporting mechanisms. So our top priority going forward, assuming these changes eventually are passed in some form, is that all PSEF-funded projects, whether they go through nonprofits or contractors or city agencies, will uphold the guiding principles that we as a committee have and the interests of voters who passed PSEF a few years ago, which are mainly to advance climate action and justice. And in the CIPs, we will ensure that funding continues to prioritize those organizations with leadership by and with benefits to frontline communities, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with low incomes, and folks with disabilities, and especially communities at the intersection of all of these. And we will require inclusive workforce goals and strong wage standards and projects that center justice and inclusion in the climate work. We also see as critically imperative, a point Commissioner Hardesty brought up, the annual funding of community-based and driven RFP projects at a critical base. And then in general, while we are generally supportive, I'd be remiss not to say that, of course, as a committee, we might have had a different strategy to get here today. We might have wanted a more publicly deliberative process where PSEF priority communities engage with our committee. But, you know, so just bringing that up. And another is that we ourselves have been giving feedback on earlier drafts, but we've not always, we've not met as a committee and talked through the up-to-date code changes. But I think we all generally see these code changes as broad strokes, setting the base for us, and that the detailed work will happen in the CIPs. So much like the past established RFP process operationalizes the broad strokes of the code into detailed evaluation criteria and grant guidance, we will be in the future demanding that the CIPs do the same, and that as we expand to funding contractors and agencies, we will have rigorous expectations of those to continue to advance PSEF values, especially acknowledging the point made that many of these contractors and city agencies do not have past historical practices of advancing PSEF goals. And then finally, kind of a side note here is we urge that the council and the city on the whole and voters and partners in the climate work do not see PSEF as backfill or stopgap for other funding that is necessary to advance climate work. PSEF was passed by voters and imagined by activists to meet really specific gaps in the reality that past city efforts disinvested in low-income and frontline community members and in neighborhoods and by Black and brown residents. And that's the gap PSEF was designed to fill, not to be the city's only climate source. So we urge that the city continue to fund climate work in all of the strategic areas mentioned here and beyond to meet climate goals. And of course, that other levels of government, business actors, and other partners also join PSEF in bringing lots more money to the table and lots of other projects and efforts to meet Portland's ambitious and necessary goals of climate justice. So that's what I have. And Sam, I think I'm supposed to introduce the next speaker, but I think I need you to do that for me because that's going back 2 slides on my phone.
This was the complicated run of show pieces that I was trying to nail down yesterday. Thank you, Megan. Our next speaker is Marcus Mundy, Executive Director at the Coalition of Communities of Color, who is joining us remotely via Zoom.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Megan, for your comments very much. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and all you commissioners for letting me speak in front of you today. I am Marcus Mundy, he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color. We're a 19-member, culturally specific, nonprofit organization that works on a myriad of issues, but within our own confines at CCC, we have environmental justice. So this issue is very close to our hearts and the work that we do. And despite all the moving pieces going on in Portland these days, I appreciate this opportunity to share some thoughts with the council today. It's an extremely consequential issue for community. CCC believes it is critical to maintain PSEF's original intent to prioritize climate investments in communities of color and low-income communities. Megan mentioned that as kind of the last part of her testimony, but that is a critical piece. That original intent is important. Given greater than anticipated revenue, we're more than excited to see this create opportunities for PSEF to drive life-saving investments that allow seniors and vulnerable folks to stay cool in heat waves because climate change hits us first and worst. You heard some of that testimony from Mr. Barrasso and his team. We applaud the chance to work more closely with the city. The city is core to our community's inability and these changes, livability rather, I'm sorry, can't read my own writing. And these changes will help the city better function as one in service to our climate and community. You commissioners work for us, the city works for us, but we must partner as community and city together for Portland to prosper. This offering from Commissioner Rubio, Mr. Barrasso, and their team clearly articulated capacity building and addressing the effect of climate change. Commissioner Hardesty just mentioned and underscored in her comments, that capacity building is essential to what's going to happen in the next decade or more at the city. So we have, you know, if we work on getting more trained folks, more people that are fluent in this work, then we already have the employment base, but we will have in communities of color the expertise to drive this and have living wage jobs ad infinitum. So it must be us, and it must continue the work of these departments. So more investments are good, but just and righteous investments are better. The city must continue to work with community to ensure that just investments are made. That's what I have for you today. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm going to take this chance to pass it to our colleague at 350 PDX in Hamco.
Marcus, before we hear from 350 PDX, Commissioner Hardesty had a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Marcus Mundy, for being here today. I hope I don't embarrass you. It's the first time I've seen you since your beard went gray. And let me just say that you look very distinguished with that look, right? Women don't get to be told how distinguished they look with gray, but you wear that gray well. And thanks for being here today.
I will just end with time waits for no man. This beard, I earned every gray follicle. So thank you for your comment.
You and me both. I've earned all of mine too. Have a good one. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. No, please. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having me today. My name is Indy Namkung. I use she or they pronouns. I'm the coalition manager at 350 PDX. We are a local grassroots organization addressing the root causes of climate disruption through justice-based solutions. Our staff and volunteers were part of the coalition that passed the Portland Clean Energy Initiative to form this fund in 2018. Since then, we've stayed involved as community advocates as the program got off the ground, and I've personally spent over 2 years working alongside the PCEF staff and coalition, as well as the grant committee, to help shape the program as it grows. Now I'm here to express support for this proposal and to urge you to secure the essential benefits PCEF brings to our communities, particularly working class Portlanders of color who have been the most impacted by the climate crisis and the least served by other climate action strategies. This has always been the value at the core of PCEF, as many folks have said this morning already, this afternoon, and it's essential that the program continues to uphold this. PCEF is a model for what responsive and accountable government can look like and what it can achieve. Look at the heat response program. Just over a year ago, Portland was caught critically underprepared for the deadly heat dome that claimed 60 lives here in town. Today, over 3,000 low-income households in Portland are better protected than they were this time last year, not to mention saving on their energy bills. By 2026, that number will be 15,000. The speed and scale of this response is going to save lives for years to come. And I'm really excited by the chance to do more strategic initiatives like this while sustaining robust support to the community responsive grants that are really the heart of this model and a proven success. It's not uncommon these days to hear that government is gridlocked, can be slow to act, struggles to address the real issues that people care about, regardless of our politics. But PCEF is an avenue to exceed this expectation. We can treat community as a trusted partner and co-creator of public policy. We can invest in the expertise and creativity that folks closest to the problems that we're all trying to solve have already cultivated. And that means real resources and financing. It's worth it. My work has given me the opportunity to speak about PCEF to organizers, community leaders, and philanthropists around the country. Last year, another coalition member presented to members of Congress about the program. And when we share what we're doing here in Portland, across the board, people get excited. They want to know more about how they can bring this model to their city, and they know we're onto something big. This work won't be over once you vote in the coming days, commissioners. There are so many folks here in this room and calling in and writing in who have carved out time from their days and their lives to share their critical insights from time working in shade equity, affordable housing, combating fossil fuel expansion, racial justice advocacy, and more. We are here because we want to shape this program's future with you. So commissioners, and particularly to the grant committee members and the PCEF staff team, I urge you to continue to take advantage of this resource. Seek out the wealth of knowledge in this room and outside of it as the climate investment plans are created and as this program continues to grow and evolve. I plan to share a written comment after this hearing with further thoughts as this proposal is refined and finalized. And I've heard many of those sentiments expressed already, but for now, I just say let's keep this program moving forward and let's get to work. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and I believe I'm passing it off to Vivek Shandas, who I'm not sure if he's online.
Joining remotely.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Andy.
Hello, Mayor, Commissioners. Vivek Shandas, I hope you can hear me okay. He, him, his pronouns. I'm delighted to be able to come in front of you today to just share a little bit of my support for this particular program. For the record, I'm Vivek Shandas, chair of the Urban Forestry Commission, volunteer commission for the city. I also, my day job, work at Portland State University as a professor of climate adaptation and a Northeast Portland resident. It was about 3 years ago today where I came in front of a few of you and talked about the relationship between trees, historic segregation that had happened in Portland, and the impact of heat waves. Shortly after that, namely 2 years after that, we saw a monumental heat wave affect our communities. And as other folks have already testified, that had consequences that were far-reaching, particularly on communities that have been historically marginalized and communities that we knew were going to have trouble coping with these hotter temperatures. I'd just like to recognize that I was very big advocate for PSEF as a means for being able to address some of these long-standing inequities. This is a program that I have had the fortune of being able to, like Indy and others, talk about to people around the country who draw inspiration from this particular program. And I am just really grateful that we have such a program and that we have incredible staff that are able to support this important work. A big part of what I'd like to at least express to you today is the role and the importance that the urban forest plays and in addressing many of these climate issues. We know that trees clean the air. We know that they cool neighborhoods. We know that they sequester carbon. We know that they provide a myriad of social, mental health, as well as medical services to us. Often goes without saying. Nevertheless, those trees, as we know, are very inequitably distributed across our city. And what we call the canopy gap in the field is basically describing how historically programs and plans have invested into some neighborhoods more so than they have others, creating a very inequitable distribution of urban forests, as well as many other services that we don't see in some neighborhoods. And as a result of that canopy gap, we know that some communities are benefiting a lot more from cooler air, from cleaner air, from carbon sequestration, from all the other services that our urban forest provides. And so part of this PSEF proposal that we are delighted to be able to support is the fact that resources will be put not only into closing that canopy gap, though also in terms of being able to provide maintenance to those trees that are planted by the city and by other community-based organizations. We know that the current program that the city of Portland has in store is that even if the city plants a tree in front of a Portlander's home, that Portlander is then responsible for taking care of that tree. It creates a kind of a ironic situation where we're really in need of further tree canopy, particularly in historically disinvested neighborhoods, in Black and brown communities, in lower income communities. And when we put trees into those neighborhoods, we know that then they have to take care of them, which creates an enormous economic burden. And so part of what this program that I'm excited that the Urban Forestry Commission has long advocated for is this irony to go away, and that we want to not only plant trees, but provide support to be able to take care of those trees. And so when we get like an April storm that happened just a few months ago, and we don't have trees that are cared for, we have limb failures of trees around the city, unprecedented levels of challenge that urban forestry has to deal with, and being able to maintain those trees, care for those trees, and give them the TLC that they need will reduce the likelihood of any further infrastructure or hopefully not human suffering or death that could occur as a result of that limb failure. So we're in support of this. We wanted, as Urban Forestry Commission, these additional investments in the Green Infrastructure Maintenance Fund specifically are incredibly important. We also noted as a commission that the raising of 5 to 12% administrative costs, we recognize that as a large increase. Nevertheless, a portion of those funds would also go to community engagement, which has to be at the center of this work. So with that, I just want to, taking off my urban forestry hat for 1 second, really support the work also happening with resilient community centers. That's that's right at the center of what we need to be doing to support communities. Resilient community centers can offer a respite for communities during those extreme events, which are going to be increasing in frequency and intensity in the coming decades. Building operational capacity for community-based organizations, as well as investments in 82nd Avenue, are items that will really help with climate adaptation at the city scale. So with that, I just will sign off now and be happy to turn it over to Cheryl Roberts, who's with the African American Alliance for Home Ownership. Thank you again for considering this, and appreciate your ear today.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivek. can you hear me, everyone? Okay.
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and the esteemed commissioners. Thank you for the invitation, Sam, and thank you for all the work that you've done on the PSEP so far. Oh, I was going to tell Commissioner Hardesty that she could compliment me on my gray, but she
She's
left.
no, she's here. She's just right off the screen.
Well, I thought that was really cute. I really love that comment. And I thought you could do my gray. You could compliment me. My name is Cheryl Roberts, and I am the executive director and the founding member of the African American Alliance for Homeownership. We are, if you don't know, we're and we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We've been around for over 20 years, probably about 23 years of really doing some great work in the Portland area, metro area. We're a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, and our core services are pre-purchase and foreclosure prevention counseling, as well as home buyer education. I'm here, of course, to support the climate investment plan. I kind of feel like Commissioner Hardesty, I just have to echo her on the devils are in the details. And so, but I do want to express what my support for PSEF in general, what I do know. I was created, as you know, to stem the displacement and gentrification of African Americans living within Northeast Portland. And while advocating for financing within the traditional lending system. Through the years, we've grown, and I'll keep it simple. We have grown as well as expanded our services, and not just because, oh, there's money, it's because of the needs that we've identified with the people that we serve. So some of those, I just want to give you an example of some of those services, which include down payment assistance programs, water leak program, IDA accounts. For those of you who don't know, that's individual development account. Wonderful, wonderful program. I call it easy money because you don't have to pay it back, and it is a match savings program. We have the water leak program, thanks to the Portland Water Bureau. Again, we have estate planning services, which is probably about 3 years old. You all probably supported that. It's through the Portland Housing Bureau. Excellent program. It's just another way that we can help sustain a homeownership within the communities of color, and in African American in particular. And our newest endeavor is Power to the People, PDX. So Power to the People received the PSEF funding. We were one of the first, or the first, one of the first that actually applied for that, for those funds when they came out. And it was for our work to provide a pathway to carbon emissions in the African American community in particular. We created opportunities for a cultural shift and a new pathway for economic opportunity through workforce development. And through the PSEF funding, I just want to give you a little example of some examples of our successes in our efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So, and thank you, Commissioner Rubio. You were there to help us celebrate the first solar install through the PSEF funding. I was on an African-American female's home. I still haven't found the statistics to say that she's the first African-American female to have solar on her home in Oregon, but I know she's probably one of only maybe 3 or 4 African-Americans, period. We built capacity that we addressed long-time issues faced by homeowners of color. The funds helped us develop an IDA program, again, that math savings program, that it actually helped us supplement some of the project costs and address deferred maintenance. And that was one of our biggest challenges, and it still is, deferred maintenance. Because if you remember, it was not only African Americans had a hard time obtaining a loan to buy their first home, they also had trouble getting homes to upkeep and maintain their home. So it's all that part of that redlining that we faced during those years. We completed 32 weatherization projects, which included indoor air quality improvement and also insulation. We installed 10 heating and cooling systems. And this is probably our proudest moment, one of them besides the solar. But we performed, we installed 1,100 cooling units for the heat response program. And as mentioned earlier, that was out of the 3,000 that they mentioned that were installed. So I was responsible for installing 1,100 of those. And so we did that because we trained 8 new cooling and heating installers. They were all young African-American males. Not that we want females, but they were all African-American males. 2 of them are now homeowner inspectors, and they're also energy auditors. And we're growing. So, and I'm going to make the case again over and over. It's development. When we're talking about contracting, the problem is who we're contracting with. But why not create a new workforce, that includes the people of color that we're serving? It just makes sense. And so we also served over 75% of African-American homeowners. And then the average income for the people that we serve, and this is all with PSEF funding, was 40% of the area, median income, family income. And if you don't know the numbers, it's like $50,000 for a family of 4. Well, that was quite a endeavor. And I think working with the PSEF staff, it was not daunting at all. It was very smooth, and we did appreciate every step. They were very supportive of our projects and even our celebrations, because we like to celebrate. That's one of the things. So I also just want to mention that things that are not funded that you're kind of mentioning in this new climate plan, that it's not funded by PSEF, but the Power to the People program, we're working on transportation electrification that addresses the city's carbon footprints. And how we're doing this right now is through education, partnerships with other local and national groups like I want to say Pinot Noir. That's the wine I drink, but they're EV Noir, and they're a national organization out of Atlanta that's doing some really great things with Electrify America and also the Portland, now in some of the Portland area, Oregon area. And so we also provide outreach and then we have an IDA program where people can actually purchase an electric vehicle with the Smart Savings IDA. So it makes sense. And so it also makes sense that PSEF is now aligning its goals with the city climate goals. I mean, that just makes sense. All supports that. However, back to what Commissioner Hardesty has said, we've been around the block probably, I don't know how many times, but we've seen it. And what happens is, if we're not really realistic about the challenges, what's going to happen is that we're going to fail again. It's not going to continue to serve the population that was intended to serve. Right now, a lot of our homeowners of color are facing challenges that they're unable to participate in the climate resilience movement that's happening not only in our city, state, but it's happening nationally. So we need to get people ready, and they need to get ready from the ground up. We see this fund as being that opportunity, but it has to be considered at all times. We see this as an opportunity to build a new workforce, so that African Americans participate in the energy sector. It's a wide open field right now. It has very, very few African Americans that are actually working and making that a career. Why not? So I do want to stress the need to ensure the original intent and goals of PSEF for people of color are upheld and strengthened, not just upheld, but strengthened during this structural transition. We've seen it, as I said, we've seen the historical impact with good intentions that go bad. So we want to be smarter. And I can just say thank you for listening to me. I want to introduce Bruce.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cheryl Roberts. You have been such a strong advocate for home ownership for at least 20 plus years in this community. Let me just say that I don't see any gray in your hair. You look at mine, there's no doubt. So,
hey, that gray works away.
Hey, Zoom works sometimes, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, you pointed out to me, I can see it, but it looks good. You've earned every one of them, and I know how hard you work on behalf of our community. So, thank you. I had a question for you, really about how do you think? Now, you've been with us from the beginning. You've had a couple of grants from PSEF and probably things you didn't thought you were going to do, like heating installation and stuff, right? So can you tell me, based on your experience, what do you think the missing piece is now? If we just funded this piece, then PSEF would be a gold mine, right, for the community that it's
It is a gold
supposed to benefit, right?
Yes. Well, and I think, and again, I think that if we're able to, so the problem we had, and we were very creative about, so if a person if they want to install solar, which is going to help them with their electric bill, their utilities, right? And that's the whole idea of it, as well as be part of the climate change. But if their structure is not together, if it's rotting or if whatever, then we need to help them with that. And so what we're doing is we were actually, get a coupling with other funding, not just PSEF, but other funding, volunteers. I mean, it was a very creative process that we went through. But why did we have to go through all that? Which took time, energy. Plus, we don't have the workforce that we'd like to see that really represents us. So it's called deferred maintenance. If you were locked out of the lending institution because of your race or where you lived, well, how are you supposed to sustain that household? So it's deferred maintenance, and it should be part of any of the funds that come out. If I want to install, let's say, which I actually did, but their cooling systems, heat pumps. The heat pumps, excellent. I could be a cheerleader for them. It's an excellent way to heat and cool your house, and it's just excellent. And my bill was it took off like $150 off my electric bill. And this is the truth. I'm a witness. So but in order, if we had to install that, then maybe the person needs their siding may be molded, or they may have some insulation problems there. And so we're kind of, there was too many limits to really getting to the point.
Let me just say, you're absolutely 100% right. I remember I had a friend who had a home, and they needed a new roof. And this is how lender works, right? They needed a new roof, but because one of the couple was retired, the other one didn't make enough, the bank said no. Had they not gotten their roof repaired, it would have caved in, and the house would have been worth zero. Because they found someone who worked with them. And again, I've learned that if you're Black and you need a loan, you can't get one from a bank, right? And so what they did was work with a gentleman, and I cannot remember his name at the moment, who during COVID started a business where he was going around helping low-income people fix up their homes, right? Like doing the porch repairs, the roof repairs, and I'm blanking on his name because I'm old and I can't keep those names in my head.
Randall Wyatt.
But I'm using him as a model because my friend's home is now worth almost $700,000. And it would have been worth zero had I not been able to connect her with this community resource, right?
Yes.
What I know is that seniors in our community are actually desperate to be able to get those repairs that make their homes energy efficient. But it's that catch-22. If you don't have money, you can't actually get those repairs done. If you're a senior, you can't get the loans from the bank. So I'm looking forward to figuring out how PSEF can actually help be that in-between for homeowners who just need a little help to actually make their homes more energy efficient. So, you just made me remember that story, and I will, at some point tonight, wake up early in the morning and remember the guy's name, who's actually doing incredible work as a community volunteer.
Yeah. Yes.
But those are the kind of things that I think this PSEF fund was intended for, right? To help people stay in their homes. So,
but it had that energy component, which was kind of restrictive, but you have to fix this up in order to get to this, just like people, they need new electrical panels just to get to the solar. So, and there's just a lot of variants there that keep us.
I'm going to stop you because I see the council president looking at me sideways because we got a lot of people waiting and we need to get going. But thank you. You and I could talk about this forever. Really appreciate you being here today.
And I'll support what you're doing with the new Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Just to kind of level set, I want to remind staff and folks watching at home, I think we have a little more than 20 more people to testify before we're done here today. So why don't we move the show forward? Sam, what happens next?
We've got Bruce Brooks on Zoom to testify, and then following Bruce, we'll have Micah, and we're ready for public testimony afterwards.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bruce Brooks. I use the pronouns he and him, and I'm the president of Craft 3. Craft 3 is a nonprofit community lender with an almost 30-year history of providing creative, responsible loans to small businesses, nonprofits, and residents. Not all lenders are alike. I do acknowledge your comments, Ms. Hardesty, particularly in underserved urban, rural, and tribal communities across Oregon and Washington. Drawing from this background and input from others, our path forward will focus even more intently addressing the challenges that climate change and systemic racism impose on those communities. We appreciate the opportunity to address the proposal before the council today, commissioners today, and respectfully offer comments grounded in part on a record that includes delivering nearly 6,000 loans of all types for energy projects in the Pacific Northwest. So first, I want to express support for two important elements or directions we see in the proposed PSEF changes. One is aligning funding with climate priorities and working within a coordinated and consolidated context for both policy and implementation. We believe that is a prudent and strategic approach to navigating what you all understand is a very complex landscape. Secondly, elevating community voices and roles is key to truly understanding needs and setting priorities, so that real barriers and everyday challenges can be eliminated or at least reduced. And while some may think of both of these points as process-oriented, I want to emphasize that both will produce substantive benefits as good ideas become even better ideas and still better results when they are grounded in the lived experiences of those we purport to serve. Second, Craft 3 strongly supports the recognition we see in the proposed changes that a financing tool or toolbox is necessary to concurrently advance climate and equity and social justice goals. Lastly, we'd ask that you please keep in mind that the 5-year funding allocations, large as they are projected to be, we don't believe they will fully meet all the funding needs. PSEF recipients, their clients, and contractors will also need access to affordable, equitable loans, which we take to mean ones that are appropriately structured and do not exacerbate barriers and racial inequities. We know this from the economic data and also from the loan requests Craft 3 has already received from PSEF grantees, clients, and contractors unable to implement projects without a loan for critical repairs, out-of-pocket portions of the project, working capital, or for other funding gaps. Deploying the necessary and potentially less restrictive added capital becomes possible because organizations like Craft 3 secure funding from a range of sources beyond just the public sector. By design, we are in a position to leverage those public dollars and do more to achieve the goals of both recipients and funders like PSEF. Similar approaches have worked successfully in Portland and other Pacific Northwest communities. Two quick examples: a loan fund seeded with public grants matched by private capital led to more projects completed with greater equity outcomes and lasting community investment than would have been possible with public support alone. And to meet rising demand for their services, contractors with access to equitable loans can more safely fund their growth, labor, and materials instead of relying on risky credit cards or potentially predatory cash advances. And you've heard other speakers comment on the ability of these businesses to scale and be successful employers in their own right, and to enable the community to move forward, both with respect to the individual projects, but also having skilled building and workforce support. Lastly, I would say that an ongoing engagement with all project stakeholders, something I alluded to earlier, enables us to structure and price loans for community needs while still managing rigorous project compliance, fund, and outcome tracking needed for program and funding goals. And so we would thank you not only for this opportunity to speak today, but also for the program and for your eye toward trying to make the kinds of changes that you have referenced in the proposed proposal before you. And then lastly, I would just say that to the extent there are ways in which we can be of any further service to the commission or the city in terms of a resource for information, we would certainly welcome that opportunity, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. Council President, and thank you, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate you being here, and I'm very appreciative to know that there's actually a couple of lenders out there that actually work with Black and Brown community members to help them in their efforts. No disrespect intended, Mr. Brooks. As you know, I'm just talking historically. That has not been the case, and it became absolutely worse when the pandemic hit. Right? It's like really nobody that didn't need money could get it from a lending institution. If you were rich, you could, but if you were actually a working class person. So just thank you very much for your testimony, and I look forward to you helping us continue to actually make this fund work as we intended to make it work. Thank you. And if I may, Mr. President, the gentleman I was trying to think of with my memory issues, his name is Randall Watt, and he's the CEO of Taking Ownership. And he's done some incredible, I mean, he's one of the most humble people I've ever met. He never wants credit for what he's done, but he single-handedly has actually saved many people in Portland from being evicted or actually having their roof falling in their house. And I just want to publicly say, go Randall Watt. I'm going to be busy for the next 20-some days, but after that, we should talk.
Excellent. Sam, who's up next?
The last speaker of our invited speakers, and that's Micah Meskel. Micah.
Thanks, Sam, and thank you, City Council members. My name is Micah Meskel, and I'm the Activist Program Manager for Portland Audubon, a local nonprofit focused on conservation of our natural resources. And as an organization, we have been engaged in environmental campaigns in the Portland area since our founding, and really helped shape, along with partners, the city by working to incorporate nature into the fabric of our community. We are very proud of our role in supporting our frontline partners, many represented today by Marcus and CCC and Commissioner Hardesty before she was on the commission, in the creation and implementation of PSEF. And that support that we were able to lend brings us today. We commend Commissioner Rubio and Director Oliveira and PSEF staff for their leadership in thoughtfully crafting the structural changes before you today that we believe outline a future program that remains grounded in the principles of the original legislation while building in strategic collaboration with citywide efforts to scale and evolve the program to meet the current moment. I'm going to touch on 6 quick points and follow up with some written testimony. First, we support the structural changes and urge council and staff to continue to be receptive to co-creating the CIPs with the community through robust public engagement. Second, the shifting of PSEF funds to other city bureaus must be additive. Further resourcing bureaus and leveraging their existing expertise is crucial to smartly implement and scale the community-centered climate initiatives, and it should not lead to disinvestment of existing core environmental programs. We are deeply concerned by the recent dismantling of the BES Watershed Division and don't want this to become a trend with this additional funding. Third, we urge you to expand the definition of priority populations to include the disability community. Disabled people are among those most severely affected by climate change-induced emergencies, sustaining disproportionately higher rates of mortality, and at the same time having less access to currently available programming. Fourth, we are pleased to see the green infrastructure strategies receiving attention, such as the strategic program for growing an equitable tree canopy and the creation of a permanent maintenance fund. As Vivek mentioned, green infrastructure is an essential tool for sequestering carbon while providing countless co-benefits for our community. Fifth, we urge staff and council to consider how PSEF might incorporate a land acquisition and protection program as part of the CIP that is able to strategically and nimbly secure parcels of land for the purpose of acquisition as a green space to reduce flooding and sequester carbon, or as to secure a developable parcel in target areas like along 82nd, of which could host a future PSEF community-led project. And lastly, we must use this unique opportunity to push for broader systems changes at the city. Commissioner Hardesty noted it's an opportunity to evolve the procurement process. It's also an opportunity to facilitate deeper inter-bureau collaboration to really leverage the expertise and balance competing interests towards furthering PSEF goals. And green infrastructure maintenance across the city must be considered a long-term role of the program. I think that's another broader systems change. And lastly, I think grounded in everything, the design of all programs must model truly equitable collaboration between the city and community organizations. And we think this is, most importantly, starts with power sharing between city bureaus and community to lead those CIP efforts. So to wrap up, we support the changes in front of you. Thank you for all your work, and we will be engaged along with partners to ensure that these, this outline of changes in the in front of you get translated into on-the-ground programs within the CIP.
Sam, does that complete your invited testimony?
Yes, Commissioner Maps, that does complete the invited testimony.
Thank you very much. Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this?
We do. We have 20 people signed up.
Well, excellent. Why don't we dive into 2 minutes? 2 minutes? I agree. So we will do 2 minutes per person. Keelan, can you call our first member of the public?
First up, we have Yashar Vasef.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Yashar Vasef. I use he, him pronouns, and I am joining you today on behalf of Friends of Trees, a nonprofit with over 50% BIPOC identifying staff. Who I am and where I have come from informs why I am testifying today. I am the son of Mohammed, a former political prisoner of 5 years who was freed during the '79 Iranian Revolution. Among many acts of rebellion, my mother Fatima was once arrested for simply dancing in public. They have ingrained in me the courage to join you today to advocate for environmental justice. I myself am a refugee of the Iran-Iraq War. Last year, I joined Friends of Trees in part because the work we do helps mitigate the climate refugees of tomorrow. The historic investment in the urban canopy that has been placed in front of you will not only benefit historically disadvantaged communities, it is also an investment in the survival of our species and ecosystems. For 33 years, our mission at Friends of Trees has been to plant trees together. We value our partnerships with organizations such as Apano, Blueprint Foundation, DPAVE, PUIC School, Verde, Wisdom of the Elders, and countless more. These unique partnerships help evolve our understanding of inclusive and responsive community urban forestry programming. Friends of Trees comes to you in support of the proposed structural changes, but we do urge you to prioritize equitable collaboration and power sharing between the city and community partners in the CIP development. It is our hope that city bureaus can play a coordinating role while resourcing the community to do much of the on-the-ground work, which should be inclusive of community-centered models that engage volunteers to build environmental literacy and stewardship ethic. What we do is more than just a tree in the ground. We provide workforce development to uplift BIPOC representation in urban forestry jobs. We engage volunteers to increase community stewardship of trees, but it will take direct investment and equitable collaboration between local government and community to ensure that our trees survive in the long term by also prioritizing funding for community outreach and tree maintenance. Our climate is changing and these trees need our collective help. Thank you.
Keelan, could you call our next guest?
Next up, we have Teresa Wong.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the proposal here today. My name is Teresa. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Evergreen Spaces Institute. We are a local conservation nonprofit organization. Well, we want to voice our general support for the proposal and are happy to see PSEF involved into to improve structures and to enable better investments to decarbonize the transportation sector. We also have a few concerns that we would like to voice up. The original piece of funding was passed by Portland voters for the nonprofit sector to build a climate resilient Portland through capacity building and community projects. While we're excited to see the new opportunities following this amendment, we remain concerned about the possibility of nonprofits getting outcompeted by private and city projects in the current language. We want to continue to remind that the initial goal and intention of the PSEF is to pass a community enterprise where the funding would help the community to build capacity to take on projects to fight climate change. Workforce development for BIPOC and other underserved communities on the front lines of the climate crisis is an overarching goal of PSEF. If a portion of PSEF funds are reserved for city bureaus and private sector programs, we request that there should be a minimum allocation for the nonprofit sector to preserve and strengthen workforce development and for BIPOC community leadership in these programs. Continuing to secure the community oversight aspect is a vital part of the PSEF program. Sorry, I'm trying to fit it in within 2 minutes. While we understand the decision to move the grant proposal to review process from the committee to staff, we want to continue to advocate some sort of community oversight for the PSEF programs. And as a final note, we want to continue to voice our support for urban trees. We are excited to see PSEF taking investments for urban trees, but there should be, but we want to support that a minimum of half of that 40 million to be invested into community programs so that there can be investments to compensate BIPOC community for tree stewardship. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Next up, we have Darlene Sherman.
Welcome.
Hello. Darlene Sherman. I represent the 350 PDX Forest Defense Team and the Great Old Broads for Wilderness chapter, Cascades Volcano, which is in Portland, as well as other parts. And I'd like to thank you for bringing forth this, Commissioner Rubio. I think this is going to be a real benefit for PSEF and the people that it is designed to serve. We are especially interested in the tree canopy funding for our priority communities and the inclusion of maintenance of those trees, which has been a major disincentive. Is the temperature difference in the parts of the city with high tree canopy in general is something like a 13-degree difference with our communities with really low tree canopy, and during the heat dome last year, in some areas there was a 25-degree difference, which led to deaths of some of our community members. So this is a really life-saving issue to address. We would also like to see that, make sure that this funding, as the things go to some of the city departments, that it is additive and does not displace other funding. For the tree canopy, in the current budget is $3 million for planting, and like make sure that this is an additive thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here.
Next up, we have Gail Palmer.
Hi, Gail.
Hello, I'm Gail Palmer. I live in the Centennial neighborhood and I represent the East Portland Resilience Coalition. And we generally support the changes to the code, but we as small volunteer-run organizations within our coalition are really fearful that we will not be able to compete under the new provisions against private organizations, city bureaus, and larger nonprofits. We have 2 points. One is that we certainly agree that community voices are going to be essential as the CIP plans are created. We want to see community organizations like the East Portland Resilience Coalition and the East Portland Action Plan represented at the table with city staff and the PSEP committee members as the details are drafted and debated. We also would like to see that you dedicate at least 60 million to 100 million annually for community-led initiatives. And we all know that down the road there will be some fluctuation. I want to say lastly that we received a planning grant. We published a community resilience report, and we are ready to go with our tree planting projects in East Portland, and we are ready to go with our community resilience hubs, which we want to design for each of the 13 neighborhoods that we work with east of 205 in the city. And we're looking forward to having enough community voices to help design this plan that we can be assured and we don't have to be skeptical about the outcome of these changes to PSEF. We look forward to our ability to submit our next implementation application, even though that looks like it could be at least a year out from now. But we can't wait to continue our work. And thank you for the time
Thank
today.
you, Gail. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Bruce Nelson. What's the name? Bruce Nelson.
That is you. Come on down. It's good to see you.
My name is Bruce Nelson. I'm speaking on behalf of Trees for Life Oregon. Thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for bringing forth these proposed amendments, which recognize the urgency of the situation we're facing today. I'm going to reverse my comments in the interest of time. I planted a Douglas fir tree in my yard. It's now 6 feet tall. It was planted 2 years ago. My wife and I greatly enjoy watching this tree grow, and we look forward to stewarding it for the next however long we live. However, that tree, by the time we die, will still not be contributing a whole lot of benefits to our city. It's really dependent upon the future generations who care about these trees for it to really give a lot of benefits to our city. Generations of Portland residents will need to assume that responsibility of care when we are gone. Other members of our Portland community need to be invested in the care, the appreciation, and even the wonder of the trees in our city that are such an important component in addressing pressing climate changes. It is our opinion at Trees for Life Oregon that the essential long-term community-felt positive connection to our urban canopy best occurs, holy mackerel, when our community is closely tied through actions to the development and implementation of tree nurturing policies and practices. PSEF guidelines can offer a guideline to that. 15 seconds, watch him go. 40 million is a really good thing. It requires collaboration, not domination, not proclamation, but collaboration. The strategic climate investment plans are great. Thank you for those when they're coming. I think I will stop. You have important work you're doing, and I thank you very much for it. And remember, the trees you enjoy today probably were planted many, many years ago.
Thank you, Bruce. We appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Next up, we have Allison Berman.
Hi, Allison.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon. My name is Allie Berman, and I'm the Communications Director at Portland Audubon and a board member for a disability justice organization. I share that to show you that I have professional expertise in both the environmental and disability sectors. However, today, I'm here representing myself as a disabled community member, and I'm asking you to expand the definition of priority population within PSEF to include the disability community. Disabled people face wide-ranging and deadly threats during climate-related disasters. Some of those threats include barriers to evacuation, power outages that take away the use of our mobility aids, life-saving devices and elevators, wildfire smoke that worsens respiratory conditions, a lack of ADA-compliant housing for displaced disabled people, and communications that often don't include blind or deaf communities. The city itself had a damning internal report come out last year saying that it's not prepared to meet the needs of people with disabilities during a disaster. The report says, and I quote, "The Portland Bureau of Emergency Management does not have the information, expertise, or capacity needed to anticipate and plan for the emergency needs of people with disabilities." From that report, we already know that the city is failing disabled people when it comes to emergency preparedness. Including disabled people as a priority population within PSEP is an important step in the city recognizing disabled people as a frontline community in the climate crisis and ensuring that a PSEP is accountable to their needs. This addition would also fall in line with the commitments the city made in the 2035 comprehensive plan, in which the city states that particular efforts must be made to improve services for people with disabilities. In 2019, the United Nations passed a resolution calling on governments to adopt a disability-inclusive approach when taking action to address climate change because we are such an at-risk community. Start the process of answering that call today by making the disability community a priority population. Thank you.
Thank you. Ali, Commissioner Hardesty has a comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate you being here. Let me be really clear. We actually have what's being proposed does include the disability community. So not just for you, but anybody else who's testifying today. So it actually has included that language so that we're not voting today, but we will vote, that language is included. Am I right?
Disabled people are only included as an underemployed community within PSEF, not as a community that's a frontline community in climate change. So there are two different pieces. Yes, it's wonderful because we experience unemployment at much higher rates and poverty at much higher rates than other communities, but we are not considered a frontline community in the climate crisis.
Well, let me just say, I continue to say we're all only temporarily able, right? If we're fortunate enough to live a long life, we go through periods where we're all have to operate differently, right? So I don't think there's any question that disability community members will be included. And let me just say that I'm continuing to work with Commissioner Rubio and staff at PSEF to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our community will be the beneficiaries of the vision that PSEF created. So I just wanted to save people energy. You don't have to advocate for that. We all agree that's the right way to go. And from what my reading, it looks like we're headed in that direction.
I just want to say, just to echo you, if it's not in the language, it doesn't exist. So I'm just asking for it to be in the language.
I'm telling you, I read it in the language, so I read it. If you didn't read it, then we're reading something different. I am someone that says if you can't read it, it doesn't exist. It's not there, no matter what people say. But I have actually read it, and the very complicated document that I have that has a whole lot of strikeouts in it. But feel free to reach out before we vote for this to make sure that the language exists. Thank you.
Commissioner Rubio has a comment.
I just wanted to see if Sam wanted to address or say anything about this.
In making the clarifications to the code, the original focus of priority populations was focused on low-income communities and communities of color as it relates to a majority of the funding beneficiaries. Now, granted, many people experiencing disabilities do also overlap with that, but I want to acknowledge what also our testimony, our speaker said, where the disability community is more explicitly called out is as a priority workforce population because of the particular challenges and exclusion within the workforce that they experience. So we didn't make any attempts in these changes to change any of the original prioritization, just to clarify across the document and make sure the definitions were harmonized across the board. So as it relates to priority communities for the benefits of the climate, the climate projects, priority populations are low-income people and people of color. As it relates to workforce beneficiaries, it's people of color, women, people experiencing gender or sex-based discrimination, and people with disabilities. So there's a little difference. The one thing I will say to both of those, though, is yes, those are priorities, but case in point with our heat response program that focused on people that were elderly. So it doesn't exclude it, but I do want to name that. I just want to name the specificity there.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next up, we have Mickey Mouse.
My name is Mickey Mouse, and I'm a student at PSU and a Portland resident. I'm here today to ask you to amend PSEP to include the disability community as a priority population. Disabled people are among those most severely affected in an emergency. We have higher death rates, and at the same time, we have the least access to emergency support. The City of Portland acknowledged last December that they aren't prepared to meet the needs of people like me in a disaster. I use a mobility wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair and depend on it to get around. Power outages make it so I can't even use my electric scooter. Evacuation plans, transportation, and temporary housing often aren't accessible, leaving people like me behind. PSEP has the opportunity to fix a mistake that was made when it was originally written. Please, for me and thousands of people like me, add disabled people as a priority population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mickey.
Next up, we have Fern Wexler. Fern, you're muted.
I'm sorry, my mom is way better at this than I am. My name is Fern Wexler. I am mainly calling in to reaffirm everything that Allie and Mickey said about ensuring that the disabled community is a focus group for this. I believe that PSEP is an incredible achievement, but I also believe that there is a large overlap between the groups that are already being focused on as affected groups by this Organization Act. And I believe that this overlap should be more attuned to, because I am concerned that people who are already a member of these affected communities will not receive the care or support that they need during any kind of climate crisis related natural disaster, or just in generally trying to recreate our city. I am privileged enough that during the 2020 wildfires, my family was able to flee the state. Many people were not able to do that. It was a very severe health risk for my family. I am able-bodied, but I have autism. Both of my parents have severe asthma. My mom and my sister have heart conditions that were being exacerbated by the wildfires. So I have seen what climate crises can do to people in my community firsthand, and I want to ensure that they are being focused on and reaffirm that it is correct to add disabled people as not just a low employment risk group, but a group that is strongly affected by the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Diane Meisenhelter.
Diane Meisenhelter with Extinction Rebellion, and this will be choppy due to time. While on the surface, many of the priorities presented are ideas we support, such as developing a more equitable tree canopy, maintaining street trees, and we'd add preserving old giants in areas where right-of-way size affects shade equity, as well as the other emission-reducing housing and transportation goals. There is, however, an underlying city precedent problem on how this was rolled out with no public input process involving broad community engagement. As someone who worked hard getting PSEP passed, it's critical that the original community-led, community-centered values of PSEP, as approved by Portland voters, be followed. The grant committee needs to have control of the SIP writing process and should engage in a robust, inclusive, and transparent community process with open public input hearings. PSEP's strong ties to the BIPOC community will result in improved equity practices, as city bureaus are lagging on inclusive contracting. We need detailed information on the community oversight and grant selection plan. Opening up the fund applicants to for-profit companies, government entities, and companies outside of Portland needs to be a pilot program that should be reevaluated at the end of 2 years by PSEF staff and the grant committee. Public confidence in city decisions around climate have been badly eroded given Zenith, the backroom deal to undermine the Clean Air Protection Program, and the lack of specific concrete actions and timelines to reduce emissions in the climate emergency work plan. Therefore, the city should not be able to backfill their budget with access to funds without clear community oversight in line with the original intent of the program. Similarly, city bureaus such as Parks, Forest, Urban Forestry have not demonstrated philosophical alignment with the community empowerment intent of PSEP and should not be providing the oversight of funds for tree canopy development and maintenance. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Keelan, can you do me a favor? At 4 o'clock, can you remind us we need to take a short break for the closed captioners?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have Trevor Attenberg.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Hi there. My name is Trevor Attenberg, and I'm a Portland resident. PSEF is an important step as a means of fighting climate change in a way that centers frontline populations. However, it does have an important flaw, as some of us have covered. It fails to include disabled populations as part of the frontline community, along with many others. Now that language is being amended, we have the opportunity to fix this mistake. While disabled people have been acknowledged as low income, they have not been acknowledged as being on the front line and thus facing some of the deadliest climate impacts. The city should know this well because last year, an internal report noted that the city is not at all equipped to meet the needs of disabled people during disasters. And climate-related disasters, including flooding, wildfires, heat-related events, are becoming more and more common. As a blind person, I am well aware that climate disasters pose a much greater risk to me than they do the average members of the average population. Blind people are disproportionately underemployed, low income, socially isolated, and dealing with the constraints of an inaccessible transit infrastructure. The design of PSEF is to mitigate climate change through investment. And here I submit to you that disabled populations are certainly in need of direct targeted investment. And let me just say once more that now that we are reworking, retooling the language, let's amend disabled people and make them prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here.
Next up, we have Ronfi Giannatino Villatoro.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Ranfis. For the record, my name is Ranfis Giannatino Villatoro, and I did not, I forgot my printed copy for my testimony, so I will try to be brief. First and foremost, I'm heartened, well, first and foremost, just my personal capacity, I'm also in the Portland Clean Energy Fund. On my day job, I'm with the Blue Green Alliance, so we work with labor, environmental organizations to address our environmental challenges while creating good quality jobs. In addition, I'm a treasurer for the Social Justice Fund, which funds social justice organizations throughout the Northwest, including Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Today, I'm very heartened by the testimonies today about including the amendment for the disabled and disability community. I think it's a good, important consideration that was honestly not in my radar, but I would love to continue that conversation within the PSEF community. In addition, I just want to echo the thoughts and comments about process. I think process is really important. It's a key component about collaboration, but I also want to recognize the commissioner in trying to bring in timely results, because what is process without outcomes? So I'm here to sort of generally support what's being proposed, but I do want to note one key important issue that I have with the legislation. There is a red line towards the end of the section 7.07060, that adds a line to the family wage standard that creates a giant loophole for who receives the minimum wage benefit. As we all understand, all employees receive 180% minimum wage benefit. However, there's a line added. It states that for the purposes of this subsection, an employee is not a volunteer or trainee. The problem with this line is there is no definition for trainee. Trainee could include an apprentice, an apprenticeship program. It could include a new hire or a new hire that's in the job training. So it's a giant loophole, and my suggestion is simple fix, take it out, and sort of work with other stakeholders to try to improve the process. So.
What document are you reading from? Oh, excuse me, Mayor.
Yeah, Commissioner Hardesty.
What document are you reading from, and what page are you reading?
Should
Is
be the
it A, B, or C?
It should be Exhibit A.
Okay.
If you look at the near final page, right before the severability clause,
Where
you're
it
going to
says
see.
terms of grants and contracts there?
Correct, and you'll
All right.
see on that subsection 3, family wage standard. So you'll see it says for employees working on projects must be no less protective of workers. Then you'll see the reference to the East legislation. There's an added line that states, for purposes of this subsection, an employee is not a volunteer trainee.
Okay, good. I see our avid staff here, they're looking at this, so maybe after all the testimony, we could get some clarification on that point. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. You know, the devil's always in the details, and one little line can screw it up for decades. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add if I can. Again, it goes against the original intent of the legislation, which is to ensure that we are getting folks within the trades and diverse and within the clean energy sector. And while we're dealing with the affordable housing crisis, we have to ensure that workers are being paid a good wage standard. In addition, the OWN report that I think through the Construction Careers Pathway Project that the City of Portland funded, it identified the same thing in terms of being a barrier for women and people of color in this industry. So I think, again, I want to make sure that we do the right thing, and if we're trying to solve for a different problem, I think happy to collaborate with folks on the committee, with other stakeholders in the PSEF committee to ensure we're thinking about addressing all needs as it really pertains to this piece change. So.
Just want to say thank you for bringing that to our attention. And let me say, I think everybody deserves a living wage job. And we have failed miserably as a city to actually make those opportunities available across the board. And I appreciate you, because what I know is a word or two placed differently in a document could have detrimental outcomes for the communities who are supposed to be impacted. I mean, I got horror stories I could share with you. So I look forward to connecting offline just to make sure that we have actually given this a thorough review prior to bringing it back for the council vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Zachary Lauritsen.
And we'll take a few minutes break after this one. Hi, Zachary.
Hello. I'm glad to hear you're taking a break. I'm a former educator. I would never let my teachers or students sit for 2 hours without getting up and stretching. So that's good to hear you're taking a break.
Imagine doing the closed captioning for 2 hours.
Oh, man, seriously. My kudos to them. So my name is Zachary Lauritsen. I work at Oregon Walks. I use he, him pronouns. My job is to do community organizing along 82nd Avenue, specifically building a community coalition. Generally, the details are going to be worked out as we've talked about so far in this, but generally Oregon Walks is extremely supportive of this. Members of the community coalition are supportive of these changes. They make PSEF more nimble, can meet public-private needs more quickly, and so we appreciate that. There's one area that I wanted to highlight that we at Oregon Walks are extremely organizationally excited about, and that is to talk about transportation decarbonization specifically as a category. And the data is clear. We know that single occupancy vehicles are major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but there's also noise and safety and particulate and a number of different downstream effects of that. And so to see transportation decarbonization on here is really important. But I want to note a word of caution, which is sometimes transportation decarbonization becomes synonymous with electrification and charging infrastructure. And those are incredibly important things. I want to acknowledge that. They're incredibly important things. Yet, unless we talk very honestly and candidly about transportation mode change, then we're missing the mark in terms of transformational change. And so as we work through the details of PSEF, we really want to keep that first and foremost about making sure that this transportation component becomes about mode change as well. So I want to just very quickly, at 34 seconds, okay, really quickly, to kind of talk policies up here in the clouds, but talk about something specifically. Am I organizing along 82nd Avenue? I'm talking to parents and students at McDaniel, at Vestal, who are right on 82nd, and they say over and over, the reason we don't walk, the reason we don't bike is it's scary, it's dangerous. And so something that Oregon Walks is passionate about is walking and getting people out on the streets. But you have to have the infrastructure that matches that. And so we're doing walking school buses and park rows and setting that up. But we think that something like PSEF could support something like walking school buses for those most hard-hit communities along 82nd, like Lint Elementary, like Marysville Elementary, and Vestal. So thank you so much for your time. Can I say one last little thing, which is I'm also not here just to ask. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves. Oregon Walks is too. If you need someone on the SIP creation, please do not hesitate to call.
Thank you. I was just going to really appreciate Oregon Walks, who's been a strong partner long before we got the 82nd Avenue transfer to happen. And I just want to applaud your very succinct but very powerful testimony. You and I are in alignment. I absolutely don't want the utilities to suck up all the PSEF money, electrifying a community that will never be able to afford an electric car, right? So when I saw that number, I was like you. It kind of made me almost have a heart attack. But I am absolutely committed to making sure as we redevelop 82nd Avenue that it is a avenue that's ready for a lot of modes of transportation. Coach Bellows' bike, I think that is the coolest thing on the planet. If we could talk about having kids be healthy, having kids actually have fun getting to school, right? Getting exercise. I mean, we should be putting that in every public school in the city of Portland, right? I mean, that's what I call decarbonization. Parents aren't driving them to school. They're all on the bike. Thank you very much. Cool. Look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And Keelan, just for the record, how many more folks do we have waiting?
We have 7 remaining.
Very good. All right, so here's what we'll do. We'll take a brief break. We will be back at 4:10 p.m. We are in recess. I just want to, where is it? Echoing? I must have hit the mute, sorry. There, that's better. Colleagues, unfortunately, I have a hard out at 4:30. We're not voting today. We're just going to move this to second reading after we've heard the conclusion of testimony. So I'll be passing the gavel to the council president. He will close us out, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank Commissioner Rubio and thank the fantastic staff for being here and for bringing this proposal forward and doing a really, that's funny, I knew what you meant, Ness. Doing a terrific job. And I just want to say how much I appreciate it, and I appreciate the thoughtful testimony we've heard so far today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the gavel just so I don't make a scene when we're trying to conclude the meeting. So thank you, Commissioner Mapps.
Oh, no, we're good. You're good. I'm the one who made you fumble that.
Rookie.
Yeah, I know. I feel like it too. All right.
Next up, we have Nora Apter. Nora, you're muted. There we go.
Hi, sorry about that. Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners, again, my name is Nora Apter. I'm the Climate Program Director for the Oregon Environmental Council. Appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony, and I'm delighted to be here today in support of the Portland Clean Energy Fund. OEC supported the creation of PSEF, and we are pleased to see the early results and community benefits of this program. As we all know, the climate crisis is squarely upon us. The air quality index in my Montevilla neighborhood today is 158, which is considered unhealthy for everyone. And this is just one example of the impacts we as a city are dealing with. As a lifelong Oregonian, I'm heartbroken to witness how climate change is harming the health and well-being of my fellow Portlanders and the city we all know and love. Portlanders expect its city to be a climate, clean energy, and resiliency leader, and PSEF is a key initiative, though not the only one needed, to help us achieve those goals. So we applaud and underscore that the city should continue investment beyond PSEF, but PSEF is an innovative program designed for multiple beneficial outcomes, cutting climate pollution, building community resilience, and supporting climate-smart economic development. Most importantly, it is designed to ensure that communities of color, low-income communities, and other underserved communities have access to resources and opportunities, and that must remain its core focus. The proposed changes strengthen PSEF and are responsive to the needs that have been identified. In particular, we strongly appreciate alignment with the city's climate goals and its dual focus on community responsive grants, as well as programmatic priorities. The 5-year investment plans should provide strategic guidance, and we hope will include both stakeholder and community engagement, as well as the sectoral and scientific analysis Commissioner Rubio mentioned in her remarks earlier. We also strongly support the near-term strategic priorities outlined, which I won't review here, and also want to strongly support the administrative changes, which are key to ensuring effective process and engagement and problem solving. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and thank you to the PSEF staff, PSEF committee, Bureau staff, and the many community partners who are delivering benefits through PSEF to Portland.
Next up, we have Lynn Handlin.
Hi, my name is Lynn Handlin. I'm with Extinction Rebellion PDX. I'm also a member of the Midway Business Association, but I'm not representing them today, but I know the area. I'm relieved to see that the city is at long last proposing some real clear steps to increase the city's tree canopy. I have some concerns about the city's ability to implement this plan and the rest of the plan. PBOT, BES, and the parks need to work together with each other and other bureaus such as the Water Bureau and Fire Department. The city has demonstrated their failure to work together. The Outer Southeast Division debacle in my area is a prime example that I know of. there has been no remediation for the gross errors that resulted in a large sea of concrete and asphalt in a low-income area rather than the promised increased tree canopy. Parks Urban Forestry has not demonstrated the ability to work with communities, and they can't be trusted to handle this program. Don't forget, in this changing climate with dying cedar trees, we know that new trees need more water for longer to get established. This must not fall on individual residents. Friends of Trees was good about this, the city not so much. Fix it. Dead trees don't help. The city must not be tempted to use the PSEF funds as a slush fund for your own budget. Some of you have already made comments that suggest you would do just that. I'm looking at you, Commissioner Mapps. To help prevent this temptation, the City Council should assure community-led initiatives be allocated a minimum of $60 million annually as a floor for grant-funded programs to be allocated 25% of all revenues collected, whichever is larger. Given the city's recent record around climate, I have concerns about the city's ability to really implement any of this plan. The most recent betrayal by the city in approving Cenas Lux was just one example of the city's bad behavior. Commissioners Hardesty and Rubio have been voices of reason in this area, and I thank you for that. Opening up funds to for-profits, government agencies, and out-of-area entities, must be scrutinized by PSEF staff, especially for-profit businesses that are part of Portland Business Alliance who fought against PSEF from the beginning and continue to do so. Please use this opportunity to prove that this city government is capable of working with each other and the community you serve. PSEF is amazing. City government, so far, a mixed bag. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kat Davis.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners Hardesty, Mapps, Ryan, and Rubio. For the record, my name is Kat Davis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Climate Justice Advisor for Portland Public Schools. I'm here to convey Portland Public Schools' strong support for these changes to the Portland Clean Energy Fund. In particular, the recommendation that the contract and grant eligibility be expanded to government entities, including schools. Portland Public Schools students, including many from frontline communities, have long advocated for climate justice. They see clearly how the climate crisis compounds individual and systemic injustices and inequalities, and they have rightly demanded that adults in their lives, especially their school leaders, respond with clear action and real urgency. At PPS, we've supported student climate activism through our Climate Justice Youth Advisory and our Civic Engagement Toolkit. And last March, our school board passed our climate response policy. And this policy commits PPS to ambitious concrete targets in greenhouse gas emissions, among other things, and prioritizes serving people with disabilities, communities of color, and other vulnerable populations. As you can see, our climate policy squarely aligns with PSEF's guiding principles and the city's climate goals. We serve the same communities, and we know that PPS will be a strong partner in building a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable Portland. I'm here because these changes would strengthen our partnership, and we could help grow an equitable tree canopy, transform PPS buildings into resilient community centers, investing those walking school buses, and through our career and technical education, train students for clean energy and resilience building careers. Our students, families, educators, school leaders, and staff are ready to think big and to think generationally about what these funds can mean for our communities now and in the future. So thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Kate, thanks so much for your testimony. But let me, I want to challenge you a bit, because let me just say we have 5 school districts and within the city boundaries. And most of the school districts where I live actually have a whole lot less than Portland Public School has as far as resources are concerned. And so I want to be clear that we have a lot of school districts, and what I'm looking for in partners are people that bring money with them, not come to us looking for money to fix their systemic problems, right? I'm going to be working with Commissioner Rubio because I honestly do not want this fund to be a slush fund for folks that have not fixed the things that are broken. And the amendment that I'll be working on is going to make sure that we have matching funds, that you're not just coming to us for money, but you're going to show us how you're investing as well. Because I actually think that's the only way to protect this fund some gouging by people who really don't have the best interests of minority folks who have been left out of this process. So I really appreciate your testimony, and it wasn't anything you said, Kate, right? But it's like earlier today, people keep talking about Portland Public Schools as if it's the only education institution within the city of Portland boundaries, right? So I just wanted to use your testimony as an opportunity to say, yeah, and we got other school districts, and we've got some districts that have actually never been invested in that we should be working with. So I look forward to you telling us what Portland Public Schools is going to bring to the table to partner with us if you are planning to apply for some grants.
Next up, we have Victoria. Next up, we have Victoria Pekar.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and City of Portland Commissioners. My name is Victoria Pekar, and I'm the Oregon Education Policy Manager at Climate Solutions. Climate Solutions is voicing our strong support to the proposed amendments to the PSEF codes, including the creation of a 5-year climate investment plan to better align with and equitably meet the city's climate action goals. Oregonians across the state are suffering from climate-exacerbated extreme weather events and regular poor air quality. As you know, BIPOC, low-income, and other frontline communities have been and currently are disproportionately affected by climate change impacts, yet are the communities least responsible for contributing to climate change. Transportation and the built environment are two of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Portland, as well as fundamental components of a livable and affordable city. Expanding PSEF programs aimed at these two sectors in particular and focusing on populations that are underserved and have been underinvested in represent key opportunities to meet the city's climate goals and deliver equitable outcomes. These programs can help ensure that PSEF investments are also directly reducing energy and transportation cost burdens on those with the lowest incomes and supporting increased access to opportunities. This includes PSEF's focus on providing life-saving heating and cooling for our most vulnerable neighbors in the form of efficient heat pumps and other related clean energy technologies, energy efficiency retrofits that keep people more comfortable in their homes and apartments and lower their utility bills, and PSEF's new focus on critical investments needed to decarbonize our transportation system. In addition to zero-emission vehicle projects, like Oregon Walk stated, transportation decarbonization should also include projects that displace car trips and pushes for mode shifts to not only displace the use of climate change-causing fossil fuels, but also improve our air quality and quality of life by building more resilient and connected communities. Due to limited time, I wanted to say that I've submitted written comments to supplement my testimony today, and I also just wanted to end by thanking all those involved in this work, especially to Commissioner Rubio and the PSEF staff and volunteers. Thank you for the consideration of my comments.
Next up, we have John Isaacs.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is John Isaacs, he, him, resident of Southeast Portland, and I am the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Portland Business Alliance, the Greater Portland Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to express our strong support for Ordinance 873-18, which will make critical and well-developed changes to the Portland Clean Energy Fund. These changes will harness the transformative amount of funding that has been captured by the 1% retail tax into a nation-leading climate action fund. I want to express our deepest respect and admiration for Commissioner Rubio's thoughtful, transparent, and diligent leadership in developing these reforms, and we strongly urge the Council to adopt the ordinance. In September 2016, the Alliance commissioned a report by Eco Northwest, which reads today like a crystal ball prediction of every problem that has befallen PSEF. It predicted it would tax far more businesses than just retail, that it would raise far more revenue than projected, and that it contained none of the typical accountability sideboards that virtually all revenue measures include when they go to voters. While PSEF was struggling under its own predicted shortcomings, Portland's prized industrial employers were forced to fight against an additional proposed tax to fund the city's climate program. This was despite the fact that PSEF was sitting on hundreds of millions of unused funds, and industrial emissions are just the 5th highest source in our city. This set of circumstances literally outraged the business community, and we expressed that feeling in a strongly worded letter on behalf of our members earlier this year. I review this history to emphasize what a seminal moment this is in our engagement with PSEF. Commissioner Rubio and new Bureau Director Donnie Oliveira inherited these significant challenges, and what they have developed with Director Sambarraso and Advance You today is truly transformational. It literally shifts the paradigm. I know these are big words, but we are now genuinely optimistic about the work ahead to meet our decarbonization goals. This belief was expressed to you directly by Portland's largest industrial employers at last week's work session. With the threat of new taxes out of the way and a commitment from both the city and private industry to emulate the Danish model of decarbonization and industrial symbiosis, we are energized and committed to work with all stakeholders, including frontline communities, towards what we believe could be the first clean industry hub in the nation. This ordinance aligns PSEF with this clean industry hub vision and gives the private sector a stake for the first time in the success of PSEF. That vision is what you are voting for today. We urge your support. Thank you for your time.
Next up, we have Beth Woodward. I don't think they've joined us, and Jonathan Roble.
Should I talk?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, I didn't know if the other person. Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm a small business owner here in Portland, and I'm actually talking about something that's unrelated to all the other things, really talking about the administrative part. When we talk about low-income housing and the challenges with development here in Portland, I see that there's not quite as much incentive for folks to build the affordable housing. When I go to the Portland Housing Authority or the Oregon Housing Department website, in order to get tax credits and all these pieces, you need green verification. Well, my company is a green verification company. And one of the things that we're finding is it is very difficult. And also we partner with a lot of co-bids, different installation companies to go out and do this weatherization work in the field. I've been to thousands of homes here in Portland doing Portland Home Energy Scores or Energy Scores. And I guess what I'm reaching out to is that the language, which is talked about multiple times today, is very important. And in the Oregon Housing Development and Portland Housing Authority, it only lists certification by third party for a company called Earth Advantage. And Earth Advantage, I'm sure well aware of, is a good company, but it doesn't allow for very many other third party green verification services, such as the nationally known NGBS, which is the National Green Building Institute. And I think these are important because if we want to verify these homes and these low-income places that we're going to build in order to make a difference in the climate, and we need to make sure that they're efficient, also in residential too. So really what my ask is to please consider adding the other verification programs in PSEF. I was a huge proponent of PSEF. I actually knocked on doors, trying to get it passed. And the National Green Building Institute, there's a lot of other good certification programs. Earth Advantage is only one, and they seem like they're very connected, and I think it's a problem. So if you can just please take note of that, make sure that the other certification programs are available. And I had a lot more to say, but I don't have time, but thank you.
That completes testimony.
Excellent. Thank you, Keelan. Colleagues, that completes public testimony. Does anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to make now before I hand the mic over to my colleague, Commissioner Rubio, for a final statement? Hearing none.
It looks like Donnie may want to come back up, Director.
Oh, sure. Donnie, come on up.
Never turned down a moment to hang out with you all.
Yeah, flattery
for the
gets you
record.
everywhere. Thank you, Council President. I guess for me, because this program is near and dear to my heart and soul, and I spent a lot of time bringing community together to put this on the ballot. What I know is that Commissioner Rubio has the right intent. She's got fabulous staff that is leading this effort. But I have to say, I'm really concerned based on what I've read so far in this document, and I really look forward to get a cleaned up version. But I am concerned that people who don't share our value system can run dump trucks through what we're proposing. I look forward to working with your office, Commissioner Rubio, over the next week before this comes back to council. Because, you know, this will be the third time we've made changes to the Portland Clean Energy Fund since voters approved it. This will be the very first change that came directly from staff and did not come either from elected leaders. At the beginning was Mayor and I that made some changes to make sure the program would start successfully. So I just need some more time to really reflect. I am, and you've heard from other people, their concern as well. We don't do a good job at the city doing all the fabulous things that we say we want to do with PSEF. And I am terrified that if we open this door, we will never be able to close it again without clear criteria and assurance that people aren't just coming to us for their own profit, but we're setting a standard for who gets access, who gets training, who gets living wage jobs, who gets the benefit from the improvements that happen. And I know you guys share this with me. I just have to put it on the public record. There's no one that doesn't believe that this is like critical. But I just have to put my concerns on the record, and I hope there's a way as we move forward. And I know you said you're coming back in the summer of next year.
With the CIP.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. Maybe talk with Commissioner Rubio, we can think about not waiting that long, because the bad doers will be out there putting their proposals together while we're trying to be thoughtful and intentional about what it is we're doing. Commissioner Rubio, excellent work. I understand the need for it, but just like a lot of community who testified today, I know how hard I had to fight to make sure that it wasn't rated when I first got to City Hall. I had to fight to make sure it wasn't rated when COVID hit. And so what I know is that there are people that want this money bad. They didn't want to pay it, but they want to actually benefit from it bad. And it is our responsibility as a council to make sure that we actually maintain the values that voters and the community members who actually moved this process forward actually brought to this effort. And Commissioner Rubio, when you and I talked, we did talk about it's missing a preamble, because other councils who come after us, who look at this language, if there's not a preamble that actually makes it clear why this is what it is and how it came about, I have seen that the political memory is very short in this building. And so people tend to rewrite history when the people who actually did the history aren't in the room. So I hope what you're hearing is a cautious support, because unfortunately I can't unknow what I know.
Commissioner Rubio.
Yeah, I just want to respond, and I just want to say I hear you, and I want to thank you for your advocacy and your role to get it to this point. And I totally understand and hear where your concern comes from. So trust me, I hear you, and our team has very much carefully held at the center this fear and this caution while trying to move community forward and create an opportunity for community to get the most leverage and most benefit out of this very, very unique and window of opportunity that we have before us. So what I will say is that, yes, we're carefully looking at that. We intentionally structured the administrative rules as a place for the committee specifically, who is charged with oversight of this, to really dig in. We did not, unfortunately, have the opportunity to have the committee weigh in because of timeline and issues this time, and we owe them that opportunity to weigh in on these critical, consequential things. This is the seminal work of the committee. This is where it belongs. And so very, very interested in working with you, commissioners, so that we can hear and ensure that those concerns are discussed at that committee responsibility level. And just thank you for raising your concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Does staff have anything you want to add before we close today?
Yeah, Commissioner, I just want to thank you all for the time and thank our esteemed guests for their testimony, obviously the public testimony that followed. We share their sentiments about the program being successful and strengthened with these code changes. I just want to also acknowledge Commissioner Hardesty's leadership, Commissioner Rubio's leadership in these changes, but also thanking the council for being responsive to the urgency of climate change. Commissioner Hardesty, I want to just also address and echo your steadfast support and appreciate your leadership and challenging us to always make this program stronger. So thank you so much for that as well.
Commissioner Rubio, do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
Thank you. I'll just say some brief, it's been a long afternoon, but very happy to be here on this occasion. It's an exciting day for the future of this program. We'll be able to make historic investments, allowing significant steps to reduce carbon in our community and expanding all of our opportunities through our green workforce. So that's very, very exciting. I really want to acknowledge BPS Director Donnie Oliveira and PSEF Program Manager Sam Barrasso and the PSEF team for all their hard work. You all don't know how hard these people worked on this over the last nearly year. And I just have to say our city is incredibly fortunate to have these two individuals and the team that stood alongside them working on this. And so I have to give you so much deep appreciation for that. So thank you for your work. Our community is lucky to have you here at the city. And also, I just want to thank each of the committee members of PSEF for their insight, for their really hard and good questions, for their wisdom, things that made us take a step and look in a minute and look deeper, and for their guidance through this. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with them on the future work that's before them to create the very first climate investment plan. So this is something really exciting for us to look forward to. So anyway, just want to say great job, great presentation, and thank you for everyone who had a piece of this on the way to get here and also moving forward.
Great. And before we wrap up, I want to thank Commissioner Rubio for bringing this item before us today. I want to thank everyone who testified. And I also want to pause and take a moment to recognize and thank PSEF staff. Sam, you've done an amazing job. I also want to take a moment to call out Katie, James, Rachel, and of course our director for your amazing work on this cutting-edge environmental work. I'm proud to be a Portlander today, and it is truly a privilege to work alongside you, Commissioner Rubio, and my colleagues on council. Keelan, I believe that may wrap up our work for today. Is that correct?
It does.
Excellent. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.